And yet we're at this interesting inflection point because we're going to talk a little bit later about another new announcement of another big model and some of what it's doing, and we talk incessantly here about OpenAI and Microsoft and Anthropic and Google and Amazon and all these big efforts they're doing, and now the Nobel Prize, and it's like all this, and then there's three articles here, four, sort of three and a half, that we're going to talk about. They're like the other end of the spectrum. So there's a CIO article titled "When is the right time to dump an AI project?" There's a Wall Street Journal article saying that executives are now they're being pressured by their boards to show returns for all these AI investments. There's a Fast Company article talking about, this is sort of an editorial saying, it's like, I'm all excited about AI, and yet it can't solve for some of these simple things that old school productivity tools are much better at. And
Mhm.
I think we're seeing this sort of weird state where it's like, on the one hand, there's all this hype and people getting all excited, remaining very excited about it. And yet there's this reality that we're having to address of, is it actually providing value? And if so, where and how? And are we being held accountable to it? So, I mean, what was your take on that sort of juxtaposition?
So I thought the CIO .com article by Grant Gross was actually a pretty good one in that it tackled the idea of when to dump an AI project. The reality is that half of these projects are probably going to fail. This point is also brought up in the Wall Street Journal article, where it says in various points that 70 to 90% of AI projects don't make it all the way through for various reasons. And so it's really important to figure out when to dump that project and when to admit failure and move on and fail fast. It's easy to talk about failing fast, but when you've started putting in the money and the time and the resources, you're $100,000 in, people have spent 8 weeks of their time. It's hard to say that that is a sunk cost and move on, but you've got to be able to figure out how to do that if you're actually going to keep up with the Joneses from an AI perspective. So I think that idea of simply defining failure and being able to actually act on it is an important piece of this puzzle that is understated right now in the AI world. Everybody wants to talk about how their latest bot or copilot is fantastic, but not everybody wants to say, hey, there's a 50% a coin flip, basically, that this is not going to work for you the first time that you try it, and you got to move on quickly.
Well, and we've talked about this a lot, that no slam on the article. To me, the sad part is that this article has to be written because these are the same things you should do with any project, any technology
Mm-hmm.
project. Well, probably any project, period. Right? It's like, understand. I mean, if I walk through how does it define it? Define success. What are you trying to accomplish? Right? We've talked about in the past, linking this to the outcomes you're trying to achieve and being able to measure those outcomes, connecting it to business needs. Make sure you're doing something that actually provides value to the business and that you can quantify that value. And then last is, fail fast, limit the damage, move in a way that you are controlling so you don't have this thing run away. And the fact that this article exists, and honestly, the Wall Street Journal article more or less says the same sort of, it's the same basic message. It's like, again, in what other realm do I go and engage in a project without having a clear understanding of the return that I'm going to get from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just speaks to the fact that when AI burst on the scene 2 years ago, it was so novel, so misunderstood, or so just not even misunderstood, just there was no understanding that corporate execs were willing to open their wallets for experimentation to just sort of like test things out. And really the big message across all of this is that's coming to an end, that we need to start treating these AI efforts like anything else and be focused on, what are we trying to actually achieve? Can we achieve it with it? And how are we going to measure that and how we're going to deliver on that? And to a certain extent, this is just basic business of running an IT organization. And it just speaks to how poorly we've done to a certain extent
Yeah.
with that in some, for some realms.
So back when I worked in project management, the Project Management Institute estimated that 30 to 40% of projects, period, are challenged before they get to the end. And that is just normal. And one of the biggest reasons is what I've heard of in multiple of my past workplaces as the good idea fairy. So some executive, the good idea fairy, comes down and decides on high that something is a good idea, and forces time, money, resources, and pushing out other good ideas to the side to get this done. And those often are 30% of projects that end up failing because there isn't enough due diligence done on the front end, or there isn't a strong enough pushback from the voices of sanity that exist in a company. And let's be honest, that is politics that happen in large companies. But at the same time, if you want to ultimately be part of a successful department, you have to have some sort of strategy for pushing back against the good idea fairy as well.